Welcome back, WW Fly Corvair. Today, the worst engine ever sold on barnstormers.com. Come, have a look. Today, we get a look at what I believe to be the worst Corvair engine ever sold on barnstormers.com. It takes the record by a mile. It's a complete piece of fecal matter for you to examine. Let's have a look for entertainment purposes only. Unfortunately, a very, very nice gentleman from Canada bought this from somebody in the US. It was advertised and sold as a perfectly good, proven running Pete and Pole engine. This is a complete lie. I'll show you why in a bunch of small steps here. Obviously, there's something to learn, but the main thing to learn here today is do not buy engines from barnstormers.com. There are unscrupulous people who will engine sold for in excess of $5,000. Its value is hardly worth throwing out as scrap metal. It is garbage. We will do something with some of the parts, hopefully, for the builder. But I believe that this is a near total loss. This engine is pure through and through garbage. Let's take a look at the pieces and I'll show you why. We'll start with piece number one. Here is a new J3 airbox. These things are expensive, and this one appears to be brand new. Somebody spent a lot of money for this. I can also look at the Stromberg carburetor on here and think it actually looks rebuilt. Two pieces. Does that make a whole motor? Absolutely not. Let's look at the errors just here. Right here, take a look at that. Instead of having a bracket air filter assembly on there, that's actually a Fram paper air filter stuffed on there. But wait for it, it's actually cut down with a pair of scissors and shredded on the edge. And only one part of the orange is in there. That's the master work. Right there, complete garbage. Let's take a look at the bolts holding the carburetor. The nylock's not engaged. But remember, you don't ever use nylock fasteners on an engine. The engine runs too hot for the nylocks to work, but they'll never work on bolts where they don't protrude. You can look at a lot of stuff, the welding's garbage, but here's the pièce de résistance. Right there, there's the fuel inlet fitting. Get a good look at it, it's an air hose fitting. Was he going to use an air hose quick disconnect as a fuel line? Was he going to use that as a barb fitting? Either way, complete garbage. And keep in mind, this was sold as a flight-worthy, perfect running engine. We'll put this piece of trash aside. Let's just take a look at this beautiful intake pipe right here with flanges. Take a look at that flange. It's got a homemade gasket of some sort. It has some type of blue silicone, which of course is not fuel proof, and it's just slabbed on there. It's a horrible piece of exhaust tubing. Any way you look at it, complete with nice dent right there to clear something. This is complete trash and garbage. Won't even dignify that with further commentary. Let's take a look right here. This was one of the exhaust pipes on the engine. Look at that flat flange right there. Let's get a look at where the gasket is for this baby. On which side? Right over here. We'll pull this up. I want to show you the gasket that was used on here. This is a flat gasket. Of course, it's burned through and a mess right there. Just chopped out for that. But that's not how the exhaust system works. This has cast iron exhaust lugs. Cast iron exhaust lugs use a shaped graphite gasket that looks like that. Does that look like that sealing on there? No, because this is a complete hack work done by a crazy person. People are concerned about fires in airplanes, and they're always concerned about gasoline. Forget that. Your number one concern for a fire in an airplane should be an exhaust leak. Garbage. Let's get a little bit of a closer look at this baby. Where shall we start? Well, there are a lot of things to look at. We can take a look at just this head right here. The head is bolted on with the incorrect fasteners. It has a primer line right here that is gigantic. A primer line is supposed to be 1/8 inch copper tubing if you need them, and we don't use them. But this is stuck in there. That thread right there, the hole that's in the head is oversized to tap an 1/8 inch pipe thread in it. This entire thing is wrong. That's way too big, and if this broke off, you would have a significant vacuum leak that would lean out the motor. All of this stuff has some sort of wadding of aviation forma gasket on it, which is not fuel tolerant. It's just a giant mess. But again, we can take a look down here. It has the wrong valve cover gaskets on it, which have no sealant. Everything that I can see externally with this is wrong. But let's travel around to the front and get a look at it. Here's something special. Grade 8 hardware store bolts stuck through the prop hub backwards. So if you want to change one of these bolts out, you have to pull the entire prop hub off. I don't know if it would be done that way rather than the other way. They are also drilled for cotter pins, bunch of stuff here. Cotter pin in here, way too undersized. The stuff is just generally a mess. But let's take a look at a few details. The ring gear is the obsolete FAR 235. We haven't used these in 10 years. Told people that they're prone to cracking. The solution was frequent inspections and having this blended. That's sharp enough to cut yourself on, so that's not really deburred. The general layout of the cooling system with these little ducts on here, this was said to run great and fly great in an airplane. The actual cooling duct size to feed an eyebrow is required is about that big right there. So there is no way that this flew on an airplane and cooled itself. And I'll show you some other details in the ignition system that will show you that it never flew or any detail like that. You can come up here and take a look at the alternator. Let's have a good look at those wires. AC output from the alternator right there. Bare metal showing on that with some type of goo or paint stuck on it going right through there. Totally prone to shorting out. I don't understand what that was. There are no crimps on there. It's just a mess. Let's come in here and see the belt on this. This may be the only OK piece on the motor. And notice, it is NASCAR approved, and that's really important. So right there, sort of a little bit of a odd piece. If we come around here, I'm going to take a look at this right here. This is the old style starter, but it doesn't have any of the correct links on it. And on here, he has put on this bracket. The end of the bracket is just chopped off, and it looks like it was just fed through some type of saw. Zero craftsmanship stuck on here. It also does not have a tail bracket on the end of the starter. Any of the things that made these systems work actually at one time. This is just sort of a terrible example of how it's done. I can look at this and think, not sure why any of this was done this way. We'll save the best for last. Let's come around here and take a look at this. Here's the back of the motor. Well, we'll just start with this crazy piece. This is a breather hose of some type connected to the old fuel pump boss. There's so much oil being thrown around in the back here to lubricate the things like the fuel pump. This is the absolute wrong place to have a breather on a Corvair motor. The oil would become ejected out of this without any problem. Take a look at the oil filler neck right here. Lovely. This was supposed to be a flying plane. That has no gasket in it. That would puke oil all day long. Moving over to the distributor, of course, this has the incorrect straight nut on it. The straight nut is prone to falling off in flight, and the timing would change. Let's go over and you can just, the general rear case here is a sand cast rear cover from a 1960 or 61 Corvair. It weighs several extra pounds, and the passages on the inside are too small for flight use. We have never told anybody to use anything like that. Coming over here, we have the condensers mounted on the outside of the distributor. See this one? It even comes pre-squashed. This is the wrong place for condensers. I've always told people that the condenser has to be on the coil. Some people will come out and say, I want it closer to the points because that's where it's supposed to be, because it's a shorter electrical path. Electricity travels near the speed of light, about 180,000 miles per second. Having 6 or 8 inches of extra wire in there will not significantly change the timing. Let's get a good look at the distributor. Again, this was sold as a flying airplane. Take a look at this, and we have an up-close photo here I'm going to show you. These crimps, all completely wrong, just done with pliers, just sticking the thing together. But this is the best one. We'll get a close-up of this. This one right here, the wire's not even crimped. This never would have made spark appear at the spark plug. Yet, again, sold by the seller on Barnstormers as a completely airworthy engine, ready to install in anybody's Pete Pole and fly young eagles or your grandkids or whatever have you. If you're the gentleman who made this concoction and then sold it to the guy in Canada, this is great. In my book, you should be charged with attempted murder. Looking around here, let's get to some of the finer points on this. Down on the bottom side, it's a little hard to see, but it has a push rod tube down here. Now, normally I pick on people who don't paint them the right color, but this one's really special, and we have a close-up of that to get a good look at. The push rod tube down here is made of JB Weld. It is just slathered in it like a melted cupcake. It's great. Real piece of unbelievably great craftsmanship. A real work of art. The oil pan gasket has no sealer. It's a stock pan. It does not have the Bernie Pete Pole style cutouts in it. There was no way that this was actually mounted in an airplane. It might have been sitting on a mount. It would have leaked like a sieve. But let's come around to some of the finer points right here. Now, we all know that this eyebrow is ridiculously short and would not provide enough cooling. And we can look back here, and there's an 8-plate oil cooler on here. Constantly told people that 8 plates would never work. There's also a missing piece of baffling in here, steel baffling, that protects the oil cooler from radiant heat. The radiant heat would this cylinder head right here would function to heat up the oil in the cooler. 8 plates, nowhere near enough. Don't understand why somebody would put that on there. But if you look at the baffling, he left the corner open. No air would flow through that anyway, and it would just be heated up by the radiant heat on there. Okay, spark plugs, obviously the incorrect ones, they are champions. But you think, okay, that's not really the problem here. As you look at the spark plugs and think, it might run with those, we'd tell people not to use them. Let's take a good look at that. Does that look like a spark plug boot to you? It's not. It's a distributor boot. It wouldn't grab the spark plug at all. Does that right there look like a spark plug terminal? Well, it's kind of squashed down a little bit and kind of cut off. I'm not sure what it is. But these were jammed on top of the spark plugs right there, just ready to fall off. I don't know who thought that this was a great idea, or that spark plug boots that cost 25 to 50 cents each weren't appropriate to invest money in before you sold this for $5,000 to somebody. This piece right here we haven't figured out yet. It's a piece of vacuum tubing, and the vacuum tubing is attached to that rod right there that moves up and down. Except what that rod did was, on the car, it's a thermocouple that moves the choke lever up and down mechanically when the engine heats up. What it's doing on a piece of vacuum tubing, Lord only knows. I stared at it for a while and it made no sense to me. Just in general condition, I can look at the engine and see cylinders are really rusty from never being painted. The cylinder head studs are screwed in different lengths. just in general, there's a lot of blockage in the cylinder fins. Just a general piece of crap by any measure. Was this the only bad engine sold last year on barnstormers.com? Absolutely not. If you want a secondhand Corvair engine, call me or text me pictures of it first. All this stuff that's on Barnstormers, particularly the stuff that's sold for Pete and Poles, it's garbage. This has no fifth bearing, it's completely unairworthy, and somebody wasted an awful lot of money on this. I don't know who would produce this with the thought of flying it in an airplane that has two seats especially. Of course, there'll be plenty of people who will come out and say, oh, well, it's only a 75-mile-an-hour airplane. It flies low and slow. You don't have to actually build it right. This is a ridiculous idea. Anything that leaves the ground and puts daylight between the tires and the grass has to be built correctly. This is a ridiculous idea that somebody built this. Last year we had a Pete and Pole that came up for sale, and I directly said that that airplane will crash from a wing failure. 45 days later, airplane smashed to little pieces on the ground. Guy lived. But when I say something is unairworthy, maybe take a listen. I have a vested interest in people not trying to fly junk like this. But even beyond that, no one should be selling stuff like this in experimental aviation. Don't support it, don't buy it. This is just a sad story of a lot of garbage. When you see this much junk on the outside, do you think that there's good stuff inside? I don't. And if there was stuff on the inside, was it installed properly? You can't tell. I can't tell anything about how a wrist pin was put in a piston, even staring at it. So, is there anything useful here? Probably not. Except save this. One lesson. Don't repeat this yourself. There are things you can buy on barnstormers.com, but used Corvair engines, especially ones that are fixer-uppers or whatever this was sold as, do not buy these things. Thanks very much, and we'll see you out on the flight line.